Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. Cathara pressed her unbroken hand against the trembling wall of the engineering deck as the silent Discovery shuddered under another direct hit. The vibration ran through the metal like a living thing, a deep, violent pulse that rattled every bolt and cable in the ship's spine. Red emergency lights strobed across the curved corridor, turning familiar steel into a flashing nightmare of shadow and blood-colored reflections. 3 minutes ago, they had been a peaceful research vessel. Now, they were prey. The Crimson Fleet had erupted from hyperspace without warning. 6 ships, black-hulled and serrated like blades, forged for the sole purpose of tearing other vessels apart. Their first volley had disabled the silent Discovery's shields. The second had crippled propulsion. By the third, internal decks were already venting atmosphere into the vacuum. Cathara's slim frame was built for consoles and calculations, not impacts. When the explosion tore through the auxiliary power conduit behind her station, it hurled her across the deck like a discarded tool. She struck the bulkhead shoulder first. Bone snapped with a sharp, wet sound that cut through the alarms. Pain exploded through her left arm, white, absolute, blinding. Her cry was swallowed by the scream of twisting metal. "Engineer Cathara," someone shouted over the comm. "Status." She forced breath back into her lungs and pushed herself up with shaking legs. Her arm hung at a wrong angle, useless and screaming with every heartbeat. Thin purple blood slipped between her fingers and drifted in slow globules in the failing gravity. "I'm operational," she said, because the word was expected, because Velnari were trained to report function, not suffering. Across the main display, the ancient ruined data pulsed in crystalline lattices. Centuries of mystery harvested from Kepler 442b, compressed into fragile cores worth more than entire colonies. That data was the reason the Crimson Fleet had come, and it was the reason Cathara did not run for the escape pods when the evacuation order sounded. She crawled. Every movement sent lightning through her broken arm, but she reached the data vault anyway, teeth clenched, vision swimming. She keyed in the transfer code one-handed, breath hitching as the backup crystals detached from their housing with a soft, mechanical chime. 11 lives versus knowledge that could reshape galactic archaeology. Logic was not kind, but it was clear. She secured the data to her belt just as the deck lurched again, this time from the impact of pirate boarding claws locking onto the hull. "Boarders on deck 5, someone yelled. Cathara turned and ran. Escape pod 7 was already partially occupied when she crashed inside. The twin Plorians, Gek and Rek, were strapped into their acceleration couches, fur matted with sweat and fear. The medical chair unfolded automatically around her the moment she collapsed into it, sterile arms extending to stabilize her shattered limb. "Where is everyone else?" she gasped. "Scattered," Rek said, avoiding her eyes. "Captain ordered staggered launches," Gek added, fingers dancing across the control panel. "Less chance they catch us all." The pod sealed with a hollow clang that sounded far too permanent. Outside, the silent Discovery screamed. Cathara's breathing slowed as the medical system injected pain dampeners into her bloodstream. Cold clarity returned, along with a growing, unfamiliar dread. Then Captain Zorak's face flickered onto the pod's comm screen. His blue, alternate skin was split by a gash across the brow. Behind him, fire consumed the bridge in chaotic bursts of light. "Pod 7, he said calmly. "We have a mass problem." Cathara's stomach tightened. "Our thrust output is insufficient. The pirates are closing faster than projected." "That's impossible," she said. "This pod is within design." "The data crystals," Dr. Malin's crystalline voice cut in, sharp and resonant. "And your medical chair. Combined, they exceed optimal escape mass by 14%. Cathara turned slowly toward the twins. Neither would meet her eyes. Captain Zorak inhaled once, steady and controlled. "We must reduce weight." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Understanding struck her all at once. Cold, precise, and horrifying. "No," she whispered. "We will jettison Pod 7, Zorak continued, his tone as neutral as if he were discussing cargo realignment. "The probability curve favors survival of the remaining pods by 43%. "You're talking about killing me," Cathara said. "Statistically," Dr. Malin replied, "your chances of long-term survival in open drift are below 1%. The collective chance of survival without this reduction is below 10. The equation is clear." Cathara's chest felt tight, as though the vacuum had already reached inside her. "We're crew," she said. "We're family." Silence. Then softly, Rex spoke. "The math is one life for 11. Gek's hands trembled over the release controls. Cathara's gaze snapped back to the comm screen. "Captain, I have the data. The ruins. You need me." "We made copies," Zorak said, "before the attack." Of course they had. Of course, the clamps disengaged with a warning siren that filled the pod with shrill, rising terror. Cathara screamed. The pod lurched violently as it detached from the silent Discovery, tumbling away in a helpless spin. Through the narrow viewport, she saw her ship, the place she had lived and worked for 2 years, receding, scarred and burning. For half a second, hope flared as the main engines powered up. Then the ship folded into hyperspace. Gone. No chasing Crimson Fleet followed her. No rescuers turned back. She was simply discarded. For a long time, Cathara could not breathe. The medical system stabilized her eventually, forcing oxygen into her lungs as her mind reeled. The pod drifted silently, its tiny thrusters long dead, rotating slowly through endless black. Minutes passed. Then she realized something was wrong. Her emergency beacon should have activated the moment the pod was released. It hadn't. She forced her trembling fingers to the console and pulled up the diagnostics. Signal suppression. Active. External command delay. 180 seconds. They had delayed her beacon. 3 minutes. Just long enough to make absolutely certain no one would turn back. The realization hollowed her chest more deeply than any vacuum ever could. They hadn't just sacrificed her. They had made sure she could not even be accidentally saved. The Velnari called it optimization. Cathara called it betrayal. As the final suppression timer expired, the beacon activated with a weak, pulsing cry into the void. An electronic plea hurled into light years of indifferent darkness. She stared out through the viewport at the infinite starfield, the pain in her broken arm now a distant ache beneath something far worse. For the first time in her life, the universe did not feel like mathematics. It felt like an execution chamber with no witnesses. And the sentence had already been passed. The pod drifted. No engine burned. No guidance system corrected its path. It simply moved forward on momentum alone. A coffin carried by equations written millions of years before Cathara had ever existed. For the first hour after the beacon activated, she waited. She counted her breaths. Each one scraped through her lungs like thin glass. The medical system rationed oxygen in strict, merciless intervals. Short pulses, just enough to prevent immediate suffocation. Frost formed along the interior walls as heat bled steadily into space. By the second hour, she began to shake. Not from fear, from cold. The artificial gravity sputtered intermittently, flickering between weak pull and weightless drift. Each transition sent pain screaming through her broken arm as her body shifted uselessly against the restraint harness. She bit down until she tasted blood. By the third hour, the crying started. At first, she tried to suppress it. Velnari education was explicit on that matter. Emotional discharge wastes energy. Energy is survival. Survival is everything. But survival was already slipping out of reach, so she let herself break. Tears floated freely in the low gravity, shimmering violet pearls that bumped softly against her faceplate. The sound she made was animal, thin and desperate, utterly unscientific. She cried for the ship that left her. She cried for the twins who had not met her eyes. She cried for Captain Zorak's calm voice as he had signed her death warrant. Most of all, she cried because the math had worked perfectly. That was what hurt the most. By the end of the first day, The crying stopped. The body always obeyed physics in the end. Thirst came next. Her water ration had been designed for emergency rescue within 12 hours. The Velnari Republic considered anything beyond that to be inefficient planning. Rescue windows were calculated. Probabilities were modeled. Acceptable loss ratios were defined. Cathara drank her final, measured packet slowly, knowing exactly what it meant when the last drop slid down her throat. After that, her mouth became sand. Her tongue swelled. Her lips cracked. Each breath pulled moisture directly from her blood. She began to hallucinate faintly. Not visions, not yet, but distortions. The emergency lights lingered too long when they blinked. The shadows moved just a fraction of a second after she did. Time stretched. Or collapsed. It was impossible to tell. Somewhere during the second cycle of enforced sleep, the pod shuddered violently. The impact snapped her fully awake. Metal screamed. The hull rang like a struck bell. A tremor rolled through the chamber and hurled her against the restraints, hard enough to tear a scream from her lungs. Alarms shrieked. Structural breach. Microfracture. External debris. Confirmed. She fought through dizziness to pull up the external feed. Static crackled across the screen before resolving into a nightmare of drifting steel. Twisted hulls, skeletal warships, shattered pylons tumbling endlessly through violet dust. The Whisper Nebula. The graveyard. Centuries of ancient wars suspended in radioactive fog. Her pod had drifted straight into hell. A fragment of long-dead battleship plating had clipped the pod's aft section. The breach was small, no sudden decompression, but the power grid had suffered a catastrophic surge. Internal battery reserve dropped instantly by 38%. Cathara sagged against the harness. 38%. Her life had just been shortened by hours, maybe days, by the corpse of a war that had ended before her species had even mastered hyperspace. She laughed then, a dry, broken sound that scraped out of her ruined throat. Of course this would happen. Of course the universe would not even allow her a clean, quiet death. Radiation sensors spiked moments later. Low-grade at first, then climbing. Invisible death, soaking through alloy and flesh alike. Slow cooking. She keyed in emergency shielding, but the pod's systems were never meant to survive prolonged exposure. Another calculation flashed red across the display. Remaining operational window severely reduced. On the second day, the pod began to spin. At first, it was barely noticeable, a gentle roll she could almost ignore. Then, it accelerated. The artificial gravity failed entirely under the growing rotational force, and Cathara was lifted from her harness as if by invisible hands. She slammed into the opposite wall, shoulder first. The broken arm took the impact. White agony exploded through her. Her scream echoed pointlessly inside the tiny chamber as she tumbled weightless through the air, bouncing off metal like a doll. Only when the emergency tethers finally tightened did she stop spinning. She lay suspended upside down, drifting, retching silently against the back of her own helmet. The pod continued to rotate. Slow, relentless. Each rotation dragged her across raw pain again and again. Somewhere in that endless turning, something inside her cracked. Not bone, belief. She activated the recorder. Not as an engineer, but as a dying person. "This is Engineer Cathara of the Velnari Guild," she whispered. "Drift time. Approximately 1 day since jettison. Life support. Failing." Her voice wavered. "My crew calculated my death." She paused, breath hitching weakly. "They said the universe is mathematics, that survival is numbers. 1 life for 11. A perfect exchange." Silence filled the pod between her words. "I believed that once." On the third day, the hallucinations became real enough to touch. She saw lights drifting beyond the viewport that were not stars. Heard voices whispering from inside the walls where no speakers existed. Her oxygen recycler began to click irregularly as carbon dioxide levels crept upward. Each breath grew heavier. The air tasted sharp, metallic, wrong. Her broken arm stopped hurting. That frightened her more than any scream ever could. Numbness spread through her limbs. Cold claimed her extremities inch by inch. pulling sensation away like tidewater. She watched the battery indicator fall, 12%, 9, 7, 6 hours of support at best. Her mind, trained for precision, did what it had always done. It calculated. She had 6 hours of oxygen, no propulsion, no nearby shipping lanes, no rescue probability above 0.0001. Conclusion: death. Yet some stubborn thing inside her refused to shut down. Anger ignited where despair had hollowed her out. Not loud anger, not violent anger, but a quiet, incandescent defiance that burned without heat. "My people believe weakness must die," she whispered into the recorder. "They believe kindness is inefficiency. They believe the universe rewards only the optimal." Her breath rasped painfully. But if that is true, then why does this feel so wrong? She thought of her childhood on Velnari Prime, the crystal towers, the silver cities, the classrooms where children were taught probability tables before they were taught names. The lessons where affection was described as a neurological byproduct. The charts where every living being was represented as a resource curve. She had never questioned it. Not until now. "What if the equation is broken?" she murmured. The pod's lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the chamber for a full second before emergency illumination returned weakly. "Power failure imminent." She laughed again, softly this time, a dying joke between her and the void. "I don't want to die as a number," she whispered. "I want to die as a person." Her words drifted into the recorder, into history, into nothing. As the third day stretched into its endless final hours, she felt herself slipping. Consciousness came in waves. In one moment, she was wide awake, listening to the failing recycler choke on poisonous air. In the next, she was standing in a garden of floating violet flowers, under silver skies that existed only in memory. Sometimes she dreamed of the twins. In the dreams, they came back for her. They were always smiling, always sorry. Then the dream would fracture. The pod would spin. The cold would return. And her final message came out barely louder than breath. "If anyone ever finds this, remember that they chose calculation." Her eyelids sagged. "Remember that I chose hope." The battery dipped below 3%. The pod slipped fully into darkness. Only the whisper of dying machinery remained. And far beyond the fading reach of her failing beacon, the graveyard watched in silent indifference as another life approached its statistical endpoint. At first, the sound meant nothing. It slipped into Katara's fading awareness like a mistake, an irregular pulse layered over the slow death rhythm of the pod's failing systems. A faint electronic chirp, too clean to belong to collapsing machinery. She thought she was hallucinating again. The graveyard had already gifted her voices, colors, impossible memories. A phantom signal was hardly a surprise. The sound came again, stronger, deliberate. Her eyes fluttered behind heavy lids. The darkness inside the pod felt thick, almost physical, pressing against her skin. The air burned with every breath, thick with recycled poison. Her chest barely rose now. Then the sound came a third time. This time, it carried structure, pattern, intention. Kathara forced her eyes open. The emergency display, long dead, flickered faintly to life for less than a second, just long enough for a single line of text to burn itself into her vision. Incoming transmission. Her heart stuttered violently. Impossible. No logical model allowed for this. No shipping lanes crossed the Whisper Nebula. No sane captain would bring an intact vessel into a radioactive graveyard filled with drifting wreckage and unstable spatial currents. No one came here. No one. The signal intensified. The communication system crackled as emergency power was forcibly rerouted to the receiver. A voice broke through the static. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran ship Defiant Horizon. We have detected your emergency beacon. Please respond if you are able." Terran. Human. The word took several seconds to form meaning inside her oxygen-starved brain. Humans, the newest spacefaring species in the known galaxy. Barely half a century beyond their homeworld. Crude technology by most standards. Reckless expansion. Emotional decision-making. poor long-term statistical modeling. Every major civilization classified them as volatile, unpredictable, inefficient. The receiver crackled again. Unknown vessel, please respond. Cathara tried to speak. No sound came out. Her throat was too dry, her lungs too damaged. Her nervous system misfired as panic and hope collided violently inside her failing body. She slammed her palm weakly against the manual transmit key. A broken rasp escaped her helmet. The signal cut instantly to full clarity. "We hear you," the human voice said immediately. "Hold on, we are moving to dock." Dock. The word felt unreal. Through the viewport, the violet fog of the nebula shifted. Then, light. Not a star, not radiation. Artificial, brilliant white-blue illumination pierced the dust clouds as a massive silhouette emerged from the swirling graveyard. The ship was larger than the silent Discovery, its hull smooth and bright against the backdrop of ancient wreckage. Blue Terran markings glowed faintly along its armored flanks. It moved with deliberate precision, engines flaring in controlled bursts as it threaded between dead warships and drifting debris. Radiation warnings spiked instantly. Collision alerts screamed inside Cathara's pod. The human ship did not slow. Cathara's failing sensors caught flashes of damage across the Terran hull as radiation storms licked its shielding. A fragment of derelict metal struck the ship's side hard enough to send a visible shockwave through its frame. The vessel shuddered. It did not retreat. Inside the Terran bridge, alarms howled. Radiation breach in auxiliary shielding. Port maneuvering thrusters at 60%. Debris field destabilizing. Multiple kinetic threats. Captain Sarah Chen did not raise her voice. "Hold course," a junior officer hesitated. "Captain, probability of hull failure is climbing past acceptable margins." Chen's hands remained steady on the command rail. "Acceptable for whom?" she asked calmly. No one answered. The defiant horizon surged forward. Cathara watched in terrified awe as the human ship carved a path through hell that every other species avoided as statistical madness. Her pod trembled violently as the Terran vessel closed in. A docking arm extended from beneath its hull, unfolding with smooth mechanical precision. Sparks erupted where radiation scorched the joint mechanisms. The arm locked onto the pod with a solid, reverberating thunk. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the hiss of pressurized air filled the chamber. Fresh oxygen flooded the pod. Not rationed, not diluted. Real air, clean. Cold fire tore through Cathara's lungs as her body drank in life again, reflexively gulping at the sudden abundance. She choked, gasped, coughed violently as oxygen rushed into starved tissues. The pod door began to open. Light spilled in. Real light. Two human figures appeared in the doorway, anchored against the weak gravity field by magnetic boots. Their suits were white, with blue medical insignia. One was a woman with short brown hair pulled tight against her skull. The other was a tall man with dark skin and steady, careful hands. Their eyes widened when they saw her. "My God," the woman whispered. "She's still alive." The man moved instantly, pushing off into the pod with a controlled glide. His hands never hesitated as he secured Cathara's limp frame. "Severe hypothermia," he said. "Advanced dehydration. Broken arm. Oxygen toxicity building." He looked at her face. "She's been drifting a long time." "We've got you," the woman said softly, her voice carrying through Cathara's helmet. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." Not alone. The words hit harder than the oxygen. Cathara's vision blurred, not from death this time, but from overwhelming sensation. Warmth flooded into her limbs as they transferred her through the docking tube. The metal beneath her felt solid, alive. The walls glowed with stable light. The human ship smelled like clean air and unfamiliar chemicals. Life. They moved fast. Too fast for a dying body to process. She was placed onto a medical platform that immediately conformed to her shape. Machines surrounded her. Real machines, not the minimalist emergency algorithms her species trusted. Hands touched her gently, not as a resource, not as cargo, as a person. "Name?" the woman asked. Cathara," she managed weakly. "I'm Dr. Amanda Torres. This is Dr. Marcus Webb. You're aboard the Defiant Horizon. Just breathe. We'll handle the rest." The medical scanners flooded her with light. Data flowed. "Core temp is dangerously low. Start rewarming protocol. IV fluids now. Slow infusion. Pain suppression incoming. Light dose." Warmth spread through her like sunrise breaking through ice. Outside the medical bay, Captain Chen finally exhaled. The ship's status report scrolled across her display. Radiation damage. Moderate. Auxiliary thrusters. Compromised. One external hull scar from debris impact. No crew fatalities. The colony shipment mission was now 6 days behind schedule. Chen did not look away from the medical feed. "Status?" she asked quietly. Dr. Torres's voice came through the internal comm. "She's alive." "Barely, but she's alive. If we'd been 5 minutes later, we'd be looking at recovery of remains instead of a rescue." Chen closed her eyes for a single second. Then she opened them. "Good work," she said. Back in the medical bay, Cathara drifted in and out of consciousness as warmth slowly reclaimed her body. Machines hummed with steady confidence. Human voices moved around her like anchors in a storm. At one point, she felt her broken arm shift. Pain flared briefly, then faded. Stabilization field engaged. Impossible technology by Velnari standards. Efficient, but used for one person. Her recorder, still clutched weakly in her fingers, was gently removed. Dr. Webb glanced at it. "A message device," he noted softly. "We'll secure it for her." Cathara stirred faintly. "Don't erase it," she whispered. "We won't," he promised. Her eyes finally closed, not in surrender this time, but in something dangerously close to peace. Outside the medical bay, the Defiant Horizon turned slowly within the heart of the graveyard. Radiation storms clawed at its shields. Ancient warships drifted past like silent judges. And yet, for the first time since the universe had sentenced Cathara to death, the equation had failed. Against every probability, against every model, against every cold law she had ever been taught, someone had come. Cathara woke to warmth. Not the artificial warmth of emergency heaters fighting against vacuum, but a deep, steady heat that soaked into her muscles and bones, as if the cold itself were being patiently erased from her body. For a long moment she lay perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid that the warmth might vanish the instant she acknowledged it. Soft light filtered through the room, not red emergency strobes, not harsh, sterile white, something gentler. She lifted her head slowly. The chamber around her was wide and clean, its curved walls glowing with a faint blue-white sheen. Medical equipment surrounded her bed in quiet, orderly lines. Transparent fluid lines fed into her arm. Soft restraints rested loosely around her frame. Not bindings, but safety measures she could escape with minimal effort. She was alive. The realization struck with quiet force. Alive in a place that felt safe. The door slid open without sound. Dr. Marcus Webb entered carrying a small data pad. His steps slowed when he saw her eyes tracking him. "Well," he said softly, "that's a good sign." Cathara tried to speak. Her throat burned, but sound came this time. "I'm still here." He smiled, a strange asymmetrical expression that lifted one side of his mouth more than the other. "You are very much still here." Memory crashed back into her in fractured images. The graveyard, the docking arm, the flood of oxygen, hands pulling her out of the coffin of metal. "You went into the Whisper Nebula," she said slowly. "That place kills ships." "Yes," he agreed. "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He considered her for a moment, then set the datapad aside. "Because you were in it." That answer made no sense. Her arm shifted slightly. Instead of the white-hot agony she expected, there was only a dull ache. She lifted it carefully and found it wrapped in a soft, supportive brace of unknown design. "You stabilized the fracture," she said. "We did," he replied. "Nanocellular knit field and guided bone fusion. You'll regain full function with physical therapy." "You used advanced medical tech on a stranger," she said quietly. "Yes." Without Compensation. Yes. That is inefficient. Dr. Webb gave a short laugh. You keep using that word like it's an insult. In my culture, Cathara said slowly, it is a warning. He studied her face with open curiosity, not judgment. Then maybe our cultures are warning each other about different dangers. Dr. Torres entered a moment later with a tray. Real food. Not nutrient paste. Not emergency ration bars. Actual cooked matter arranged with care. Steamed grains, soft vegetables, and a thin slice of protein prepared in a way that made Cathara's stomach twist painfully with sudden hunger. You need calories, Torres said gently. We adjusted the composition to match your physiology as best we could. Cathara stared at the tray. You researched my biology? Yes. In the middle of a rescue operation? Yes. Why? Torres hesitated, then smiled. Because if we fed you the wrong thing, it could harm you. That explanation was trivial. And yet, Cathara picked up a utensil with trembling fingers and tasted the food. Flavor bloomed across her senses. Mild, warm, carefully balanced. Not optimized for maximum nutrition per energy unit. Designed for comfort. The first tear fell into the bowl before she realized she was crying again. No one has ever cooked for me before, she whispered. Torres's smile softened. Then we're honored to be the first. Later, once her strength stabilized, they helped her walk. The corridors of the Defiant Horizon were wide and brightly lit, painted in warm colors that served no functional purpose. Art adorned the walls, images of blue oceans, green forests, human faces locked in expressions Cathara had no mathematical vocabulary to describe. Crew members paused as she passed. Some waved, some smiled. None stared at her like a specimen. She was a curiosity, but not an object. They treated her like someone who belonged. The music reached her by accident. At first, she thought it was another hallucination, soft vibrations in the air carrying unfamiliar patterns. Then she followed the sound to a communal space where a human sat with a stringed instrument resting across his lap. His fingers moved in precise, flowing motions, producing layered harmonies that made her chest ache in a way she had never felt before. What function does this serve? She asked. The pilot looked up in surprise. Function? He repeated. Yes. Does it regulate morale? Improve focus? Enhance coordination? He considered this seriously. Sometimes it helps people feel less alone. That answer lodged painfully inside her. In the ship's library, Cathara found something far more unsettling than music. Human history. She accessed it out of pure professional curiosity at first. A newly encountered species always demanded analysis. Social behavior, technological progression, conflict models, resource strategies. But the data refused to conform to clean logic. Humans went to war over principles that could not be quantified. They built hospitals that treated enemies. They fed strangers. They sent aid to disasters that offered no return on investment. They had laws forcing healers to help the poor without payment. They had agreements, ancient and repeatedly violated, that tried to limit suffering even in warfare. According to every survival efficiency model known to the Velnari, humans should have collapsed under the weight of their own wastefulness. Instead, they had conquered disease, spread across hundreds of worlds, built alliances across dozens of species. Cathara found Captain Shen there one cycle later, standing before a projected image of Earth, an impossibly blue world floating in darkness. Your species should not exist, Cathara said quietly. Chen did not turn immediately. That's what the models say? Yes. Chen smiled faintly. Models get a lot of people killed. Cathara studied the image of Earth. So many resources spent protecting those who cannot repay them. Yes. And yet, you grow faster than anyone. Yes. How? Chen finally turned. Because when people know they won't be abandoned the moment they become inconvenient, she said, they dare to build things bigger than themselves. The words echoed painfully. On the fourth day, Cathara accessed the mission logs. She found the entry without searching for it. Mission, deviation, authorization, honor, captain's order. The Defiant Horizon had been transporting critical medical supplies to a human colony on the edge of outbreak. a slow-moving biological plague, non-lethal to most, but fatal to the very young and very old. The medicine was urgently needed. Time mattered. The moment her beacon appeared on their sensors, Captain Chen had ordered a course deviation. 3 full days of delay, 3 days during which people on that colony continued to suffer. Some of them died. Cathara confronted Chen on the bridge. "You chose me over your own people," she said. "Yes. How can you accept that?" Chen met her gaze without retreat. "They were sick," Chen said. "You were dying. That does not make the equation better." "No," Chen agreed. "It makes it harder." Cathara's voice trembled. "Why am I worth that cost?" Chen was silent for a long time. Then she said, simply, "Because you are a person." The concept detonated inside Cathara like a gravity bomb. Not a variable, not a resource, not an asset. A person. That night, Cathara lay awake in a bed that molded gently to her injured body, listening to the soft hum of the human ship around her. She thought of the Velnari classrooms, of children taught to suppress attachment, of teachers explaining that love created inefficiency in decision-making, of the charts that proved compassion led to extinction. Yet here was a species built almost entirely on that so-called flaw, thriving. For the first time in her life, Cathara felt something treacherous bloom inside her. Doubt. Not doubt in equations, but doubt in what those equations were allowed to measure. Cathara discovered the truth by accident. She had only meant to review the Defiant Horizon's navigational logs, out of habit more than suspicion. Even aboard a ship that ran on kindness instead of calculation, she remained an engineer. Patterns comforted her. Systems made sense. Numbers were safe until she found the timestamp. The moment her beacon had been detected, the moment Captain Chen had ordered the course deviation, and the projected casualty curve that followed. 3 days of delay, 27 projected fatalities on the colony world of Haven Reach, revised after the shipment finally arrived. 19 actual deaths, 19 human lives that might have been saved if the Defiant Horizon had not turned toward the graveyard. If it had not turned toward her, Cathara's hands trembled as the data scrolled. 19. The Velnari voice inside her mind rose instantly, clean and merciless. 19 lives lost to save one. The equation is inefficient. The choice is wrong. Her chest tightened painfully. She left the terminal and walked, slowly, unsteadily, toward the bridge. Captain Sarah Chen was standing at the forward rail when Cathara entered, hands folded behind her back as she watched the stars roll past. The hyperspace wake rippled like a living ocean beyond the viewing screen. "You knew," Cathara said. Chen did not turn. "Yes." "You knew people would die if you diverted." "Yes." "Then why?" Cathara demanded, voice shaking. "Do you not regret it?" Silence stretched between them. Then Chen spoke softly. "I regret the deaths. I do not regret the choice." Cathara stepped closer, anguish sharpening her words. "That makes no sense." "It makes human sense," Chen replied. "Explain it." Chen turned at last. When she looked at Cathara, there was no defensiveness in her eyes, only weight. "If I had chosen not to save you," Chen said, "I would have taught my crew that some lives are not worth the fuel it costs to reach them." She gestured around the bridge. "And if I teach them that, then one day, when one of them is the one drifting alone, the math will decide their fate too." Cathara's breath caught. "I won't build a world where we abandon each other faster and faster until no one is left," Chen finished quietly. Before Cathara could respond, the proximity alert chimed. "Approach vector. Velnari-controlled space station. Her home. The place she should have died loyal to." 2 hours later, the station came into view. Vast, symmetrical, flawless. Silver geometry against the stars. Nothing wasted, nothing out of place. The station controller, Zexai, requested immediate diplomatic boarding. Cathara knew what that meant. They had traced her. They had calculated her value. They had come to retrieve their asset. The docking sequence was flawless. The airlock opened. Zexai entered flanked by 2 officials of the Republic. Their silver skin reflected the bridge lights like cold mirrors. Their eyes moved precisely, cataloging crew, equipment, exits, tactical layouts. They did not look at Cathara at first. Captain Sarah Chen, Zexai said formally, you are in possession of Velnari citizen and classified guild engineer Cathara. She was recorded as deceased following a valid emergency triage decision by her commanding officer. He finally turned toward her. It seems the report was premature. She's not cargo, Chen said. She's our guest. That distinction is not recognized under Velnari operational law, Zexai replied. Cathara, return with us. Your loss has already caused measurable inefficiency. Cathara felt something inside her grow very still. My loss was caused by my crew, she said, not by inefficiency. Zexai's eyes narrowed slightly. They acted correctly. One life was sacrificed to preserve 11. Cathara took a slow breath. Then she did something no Velnari had done publicly in recorded history. She activated her recorder. Her own dying voice filled the bridge. They calculated my death. The twins' shaken voices followed. The math is one life for 11. Captain Zorak's calm sentence echoed through the human ship like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. We will jettison Pod 7. Every word spread instantly through open diplomatic channels. The broadcast went live. Across local systems, across trade routes, across every listening relay where the Velnari reputation for cold logic and superior ethics had gone unchallenged for centuries. Zexai's face changed. Not in rage, in shock. This recording is classified, he snapped. It's truth, Cathara said. Behind Zexai, the two officials exchanged disturbed glances. Calculations were occurring behind their eyes. Damage control models, reputation curves, alliance risk probabilities. Captain Chen folded her arms. Congratulations, Controller, she said calmly. Your equation just met the public. Zexai recovered quickly. You misunderstand, he said, voice tightening. Emotion does not invalidate logic. No, Cathara replied. It reveals what logic ignores. One of the Velnari officials spoke. Engineer Cathara's technical knowledge belongs to the Republic. Losing her is inefficient. Cathara turned to him. There it is again, she said softly. Even now you don't see me. You see lost output. Zexai lifted his chin. All citizens are resources. No, Captain Chen said flatly. They're people. Zexai's gaze flicked toward her. Your species is reckless. You trade future security for momentary emotional satisfaction. Chen stepped forward. We've been spacefaring for 50 years. We have over 200 colonies. We eradicated famine on our core worlds. We formed mutual defense alliances with species older than your empire. She met his eyes without flinching. If kindness is so inefficient, we shouldn't be here at all. Zexai hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Dr. Webb spoke quietly from the side. Controller, may I ask when your last major technological breakthrough occurred? Zexai answered automatically. Approximately 212 cycles ago. Webb nodded. And how long since humanity discovered faster-than-light travel? 50 cycles, Zexai replied. And in that time, we built medical nanotechnology, adaptive AI, interspecies biological interfaces, and deep space rescue protocols you consider financially irrational, Webb said gently. Perhaps your logic is too optimized to take the risks that lead to growth. The words hit harder than any accusation. For the first time since stepping aboard the human ship, the Velnari looked uncertain. Cathara felt something inside her chest finally break free. I am not coming back, she said. Zexai turned sharply toward her. You belong to your people. They left me to die. They saved 11 lives. They killed one, she shot back. Behind her, Captain Chen spoke with quiet authority. Under Galactic Sentience Charter Article 7, Cathara has the right to seek asylum. You may disagree with her reasons, but you cannot deny her agency. Zexai's jaw tightened. This will have consequences. So did abandoning her, Chen replied. The standoff stretched. Then, slowly, Zexai lowered his hands. Very well, he said. If this is truly your choice, Cathara of the Guild, we will not take you by force. Cathara felt a strange, unexpected ache at the sound of his words. And remember, Zexai added, softer now, you will always be a Velnari. Cathara met his gaze. I will always remember what that almost cost me. The Velnari delegation departed in silence. As the airlock sealed behind them, the Defiant Horizons crew exhaled as one. Cathara remained standing in the center of the bridge. For the first time in her life, she was no one's asset, no one's calculation, just a person who had chosen. The station remained on the screen long after the Velnari delegation departed. Perfect, symmetrical, cold. Cathara stood silently at the center of the bridge, watching the silver geometry of her birthworld's outpost rotate with flawless precision. Every angle optimized, every corridor planned, every life categorized. For the first time, it looked small. Captain Chen did not rush her. None of the crew did. They understood something that still felt alien to Cathara. Some decisions required silence to grow heavy enough to carry their own weight. Finally, she spoke. I don't know who I am without their equations. Chen nodded once. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of choice. The station controller's formal transfer notice appeared on the console moments later. Velnari, citizen Cathara. Status, voluntarily separated. No fanfare, no judgment, just a line in a system. A life reduced to a category again. Chen studied the notice, then dismissed it with a flick of her hand. Welcome aboard officially, Engineer Cathara. The words struck deeper than any ceremony. Engineer, not asset, not resource, not survivor. She exhaled slowly. Thank you, Captain. The Defiant Horizon disengaged with a gentle shudder. Docking clamps released. Thrusters fired in controlled arcs. The stars shifted as the human ship turned away from the station that had once defined Cathara's entire identity. She did not look back. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she had finally learned that some forms of gravity were stronger behind than ahead. The days that followed felt unreal. Cathara moved through the ship no longer as a patient, but as a member of the crew in training. Engineer Kim worked beside her in the systems bay, not as a supervisor, but as a partner. They debated designs. They argued efficiency. They laughed at mistakes. For the first time in her life, no one evaluated her worth by how much energy she saved, only by whether what she built helped someone else. She learned how human systems embraced redundancy instead of minimizing it. Multiple backups for functions that logic said only needed one. Life support buffers far beyond mathematical necessity. Escape pods stocked with supplies meant for strangers who statistically would never exist. Why build for what probably won't happen? She asked Kim one shift. Kim shrugged. Because if it does happen, we want someone to come home. That word again. Home. In the medical bay, Dr. Torres removed Cathara's final brace. Her arm had healed almost perfectly. Tiny scars remained where bone had knitted itself together under guided nanofusion. You're cleared for full duty, Torres said. Cathara hesitated. Why did you specialize in medicine? She asked. Torres smiled faintly. Because when I was 8, a stranger pulled me out of a river when I couldn't swim. And you chose your life around that? Yes. That decision doesn't maximize probability curves. No, Torres agreed, but it shaped the only life I'll ever get. Cathara turned that thought over for a long time. Weeks later, a transmission reached the Defiant Horizon from the wider galactic network. The broadcast Cathara had released had gone far beyond trade routes. Public response fractured the Republic's diplomatic standing. Several allied species demanded ethical review of Velnari triage doctrine. Some worlds suspended contracts. Others demanded oversight. For the first time in recorded Velnari history, their ethics were no longer treated as self-evident truth. Cathara watched the report silently. She felt no triumph. Only a quiet, steady sense of release. Captain Chen stood beside her. You didn't just save yourself, she said. You forced an entire civilization to look at what it calls necessary. Cathara shook her head slightly. They'll adapt, or they'll calcify further. That's true, Chen said. But either way, you broke the illusion that their logic was sacred. Cathara looked at her. What you did, saving me, may have cost lives. Yes, Chen said, without evasion. And yet you do it again. Chen met her gaze steadily. Yes. Cathara felt the last chain of her old logic loosen. Not break, loosen. And that made all the difference. That night, music echoed through the communal deck again. Pilot Santos played softly, while a few crew members listened in quiet companionship. Some talked, some merely existed together. Cathara stood near the bulkhead, watching them. Dr. Webb joined her. You still look like you're waiting for the calculation to appear, he said. Old reflex, she admitted. It doesn't go away completely, he said. We just learn when to ignore it. She considered the crew. They're not perfect, she said. No, Webb agreed. We're human. And yet you risked everything for one stranger. Webb smiled gently. Not everything. Just what we were willing to lose to remain who we are. She absorbed that in silence. For the first time, she understood something her people never had. You could lose resources without losing yourself. But if you lost who you were, no amount of efficiency could recover it. 1 month later, the Defiant Horizon received a distress signal. Another ship. Another unknown species. Another dying stranger between stars. Cathara stood in the engineering bay when the alert came through. The beacon's projection hovered in the air, faint, unstable, fading. The crew did not hesitate. They never did. Engines altered course. Cathara felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear, not doubt, recognition. Captain Chen's voice echoed through the ship. All hands, rescue protocol Alpha. Cathara moved before she consciously decided to. She reached her station, began rerouting power, strengthened the shield grid, extended sensor resolution. Her fingers flew across human interfaces that now felt natural beneath her hands. Engineer Kim glanced at her. No calculations? He teased. Cathara met his eyes. I already made one. He raised an eyebrow. She smiled. I calculated the kind of person I want to be. Hours later, as the Defiant Horizon closed on another dying light in the dark, Cathara stood on the bridge beside Captain Chen. The odds don't favor survival, Chen said quietly. They never do, Cathara replied. Chen studied her with new curiosity. You're not afraid anymore. Cathara shook her head. I am, but I no longer think fear gets to vote alone. Chen smiled. That was how it always began. Not with victory, not with prophecy, not with conquest, but with a single choice made in defiance of cold probability. Later, as hyperspace folded around the ship in shimmering distortion, Cathara returned to her quarters. She retrieved the recorder, the one that carried her dying words from the void. She listened to her own voice, thin, weak, furious with quiet hope. Remember that I chose hope over logic. She didn't erase it. She added to it, my name is Cathara. I was abandoned because I was considered inefficient. I survived because a species that does not calculate compassion decided I mattered. She paused. The universe is still vast, still cold, still dangerous. But I have learned something my people forgot. She looked through the viewport at the rivers of hyperspace light. Warmth is a technology too. She ended the recording. Outside, stars moved faster than thought. The galaxy would continue to calculate. Empires would still weigh lives against outcomes. Logic would still govern machines, fleets, and markets. But somewhere in the deep dark between systems, a white and blue ship would keep changing course for voices that should not matter by any known model. And aboard that ship would travel a former resource who had learned how to be a person. The Defiant Horizon did not carry the largest weapons. It did not possess the most efficient engines. It did not have the best equations. But it carried something the rest of the galaxy had long forgotten how to measure. It carried people who chose to be human. And in a universe ruled by cold mathematics, that was the most powerful force of all.